In Christian theology, Traducianism is a doctrine about the origin of the soul, holding that this immaterial aspect is transmitted through natural generation along with the body, the material aspect of human beings. That is, an individual's soul is derived from the souls of the individual's parents. This implies that only the soul of Adam was created directly by God, in contrast with the idea of creationism of soul, which holds that all souls are created directly by God. History of the doctrine. The Church Fathers universally agreed that the soul of Adam was directly created by God. Tertullian actively advocated Traducianism, while some of the later Fathers, most notably St. Augustine, at the outbreak of Pelagianism, began to question the creation by God of individual souls and to incline to the opposite opinion, which seemed to facilitate the explanation of the transmission of original sin. Thus, writing to St. Jerome Street, Augustine said, "If that opinion of the creation of new souls is not opposed to this established article of faith, let it be also mine. If it is, let it not be thine." Theodorus of Bukhara, Macarius, and Gregory of Nyssa also favored this view. Amongst the scholastics there were no defenders of Traducianism. Hugh of St. Victor and Alexander of Hales alone expressed doubt, and characterized creationism as the more probable opinion. All the other schoolmen hold creationism as certain and differ only in regard to the censure that should be attached to the opposite error. Accordingly, Peter Lombard asserted, "The Catholic Church teaches that souls are created at their infusion into the body." St. Thomas Aquinas is more emphatic. "It is heretical to say that the intellectual soul is transmitted by process of generation." There was a diversity of opinions among the remaining scholastics. Some held that the soul of a child is produced by the soul of the parent just as the body is generated by the parent body. Others maintained that all souls are created apart and then united with the respective bodies, either by their own volition or by the command and action of God. Others again declared that the soul in the moment of its creation is infused into the body, though for a time these several views were upheld, and though it was doubtful which came nearest the truth, the Church subsequently condemned the first two and approved the third. Gregory of Valencia spoke of generationism as certainly erroneous, while there are no explicit definitions authoritatively put forth by the Catholic Church that would warrant calling the doctrine of creationism deified. Nevertheless, there can be no doubt as to which view has been favored by ecclesiastical authority, that the soul sinned in its pre-existent state, and on that account was incarcerated in the body. The Catholic Church regards as a fiction which has been repeatedly condemned. Divested of this fiction, the theory that the soul exists prior to its infusion into the organism, while not explicitly reprobated, is obviously opposed to the doctrine of the Church, according to which souls are multiplied correspondingly with the multiplication of human organisms. But whether the rational soul is infused into the organism at conception, as the modern opinion holds, or some weeks subsequently, as medieval scholastics supposed on the basis that the body of the embryo was not human, is an open question with some theologians. Main arguments for Traducianism. Supporters of Traducianism present arguments from the Bible such as the following. Begetting includes the image and likeness of God, but since God is spirit, this must mean the immaterial aspect of human beings. God's creation is finished, thus no new souls are created directly, but are instead transmitted by natural generation just as the body is. Creationism destroys the idea of the miraculous and supernatural, since it incorporates God's supernatural, miraculous creation of the soul into the natural process of reproduction. This is inherently contradictory, since it makes that which is against natural law a part of nature. It is against natural law that something is created out of nothing. God created all things very good, yet many Christians understand the Bible to teach that after the fall, all are sinful at birth and from conception. Since most theologians hold that God would not have created something sinful, it follows that souls are not created directly but generated. Those who adhere to Roman Catholicism believe that it is possible for God to create a soul that simultaneously takes on a fallen nature, much like He can create a soul that simultaneously is prevented from taking on a fallen nature. This view is not typically held by Protestants or other Christian denominations. Genesis chapter 46 verse 26 can be understood to teach that souls are already present in the loins, and Hebrews chapter 7 verse 10 seems to take this view. In Genesis chapter 6, some interpreters see the Traducian model as the best explanation for the begetting of monstrous offspring with human bodies and demonic souls by the angels that took wives of the daughters of men. The soul creationists' difficulty of God creating souls for such monsters may be why most later churchmen rejected the literal interpretation of Genesis chapter 6 as referring to angels interbreeding with human women. Supporters. Traducianism was developed initially by Tertullian and arguably propagated by Augustine of Hippo, the most influential theologian of Western Christianity. It has been endorsed by church fathers such as S.D.S. Gregory of Nyssa, Anastasius Senator, Hilary of Poitiers, Ambrose of Milan, and other theological figures in the early centuries of the Orthodox Church. Protestant advocates include various Lutheran churches as well as some modern theologians such as Augustus H. Strong, W.G. T. Shedden, Gordon Clark, Louis Sperry Chafer, Millard Erickson, Norman L. Geisler, Robert Culver, and Robert L. Raymond. Opposition. Reasons for opposing the Traducianism of human beings include the metaphysical argument that since humans cannot control their own existence, their existence cannot be caused by themselves, it must rather be caused by a necessary being otherwise known as God. Creation, in other words, includes God's ongoing causation of human existence. This causation is through the human soul because, as St. Thomas Aquinas argues, the human soul has activities beyond the capacity of matter, and the existence of these activities shows that the human soul is both immaterial and immortal, but not independent of God's causality. Yet another argument for opposing Traducianism is from the Genesis accounts of creation. If it took divine action to create human beings in the beginning, it takes divine action now because neither in the beginning nor in the present is it possible for mortal beings to make immortal souls. Some Reformed Protestants oppose Traducianism by contending that it means that if the parents of the child are regenerate, then the soul of the child must also be regenerate, which obscures the doctrine of original sin as articulated by Augustinian theologians of the Calvinist tradition. The charismatic movement also generally supports the idea that the Holy Spirit is creator of every individual soul, citing the traditional hymn Veni Creator Spiritus as evidence that Christians have long invoked the divine soul-making properties of the Spirit. In opposition, the Creator might simply refer to God as the earliest creator of universe as a whole. John chapter 5 verse 17 states, "But Jesus answered them, My Father is still working, so I am working too," indicating that God is still at work giving life at the time Jesus' words are spoken. But working can simply have the meaning that God is simply working for the salvation of mankind. In its origin it was an allusion to the Jewish belief that God remained actively working in the universe even after its creation and does not necessarily mean soul creation.